This is KDPI 89.3 FM, Ketchum. Good morning. This is Ellie Newman, and this is It's Relationship. My guest today is Liz Roquet. She's the brains, brawn, and artiste behind Lizzy's Fresh Coffee. She's a true artisan and a connoisseur, and her passion is coffee. Great coffee. We'll spend the next hour learning what led her to this passion and the complexities and intricacies of her craft. From Lizzy's Fresh Coffee. Welcome, Liz.
Hi, Ellie. Nice to be here.
Thanks for joining us. I wanted to start with talking a little bit about your relationship with coffee, and we'll get back to it in more depth a little later on. I had heard you say that you're a pastry chef's daughter, and you had a love of coffee from as far back as you can remember. What was it like growing up as you did?
Oh my gosh, it was great. And really, it is true. I'm the daughter of a pastry chef called a conditor, and coffee was a huge part of our lives right from the beginning. I mean, whether it was breakfast and bread with coffee or the afternoon cake and coffee, which is so much a part of the Austrian lifestyle.
So were you drinking coffee as a child?
I wasn't drinking coffee as a little child, but I did love the taste of coffee. So I was one of those weird little kids that always went for the coffee nips, the coffee ice cream, the coffee, buttercream frosting. I just really enjoyed the taste of it, but I wasn't drinking it. What I really experienced as a little girl was that culture of coffee. In my parents' pastry shop at 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock every day, there were people all around, gathered around coffee and cake, just talking and enjoying each other and taking the time to relate. And I think not knowing at the time how joyful and special that was, now I look at it and I go, it is amazing how much coffee brought people together and how there was so much love built around coffee. Oh, and of course, a little sugar and cake doesn't hurt either.
Well, but and that tradition, that's something we don't have in America. My mom was British, and we had tea every day at 4 o'clock or so. And I found since she's passed away and even when we moved away, I missed that. I missed that social hour, or half hour, or 15 minutes of connectedness. And whenever my sisters and I get together, or my brother, it's like, we make tea. Who wants tea?
I know. And
it's really nice.
It really isn't about the coffee specifically. It's about getting together and communicating and sharing and just having time.
And a tradition, sort of that tradition is wonderful. And you mentioned that he was a
conditor.
Conditor. Mm-hmm. And is that what the konditorei is?
That's correct.
Named after in Sun Valley?
My dad actually came to Sun Valley in 1967 and was the konditorei's first conditor.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Wonderful. And so what was your favorite cake or pastry that he made? Oh my gosh,
I can never say no to a Black Forest tort. Black, chocolate cake, whipped cream, cherries. Oh my God.
That's wonderful. So your love for coffee sort of materialized with experiencing that social element as you were growing up. And when did you actually have your first cup? Do you remember?
I definitely remember. It was when I began working in my parents' coffee shop when they opened their own shop in Ketchum. And I was about 13 and I was on my first dishwashing shift. And I was like, yeah, that mocha looks like a pretty great idea. And I was pretty much hooked after that. It really... drinking coffee occasionally at the shop. Kids can only handle so
right.
much. I probably didn't realize that first time that I was awkwardly sweaty what was causing it. But
often had a lot of energy.
Exactly. I always got to go visit my grandma and my family in Austria, and that's when I really started to appreciate what coffee could be. My grandma in particular would make a stovetop espresso every morning for us in her little kitchen, and we'd have the most amazing, sweet, delicious coffee. And then we'd go out. For example, in Kitzbühel, there's a shop called Langer's where my father was first the apprentice, and it just has this beautiful tradition of those afternoon coffee times. We'd go there and have these beautiful, amazing coffees and cakes again, traveling to Salzburg, Vienna, Venice, and so on. So I really had my eyes open to how delicious and amazing coffee could be.
And all that surrounded it, it sounds like.
I mean, who doesn't love a castle?
Right. And so 13 when you started, is that a, sort of in Europe, would that be an average age when kids start drinking? I've just noticed lately seeing kids here, 10, 8, 9 with their mochas. And if that was more an American thing.
I would say it's probably more common. I would have to say my son really enjoys his own coffee.
Yeah,
so he carries along the tradition of that genetic desire for the the coffee bean.
So what led you then to open your, I'm going to call it a shop, because I think that encompasses everything. It's a business, and it's a wonderful, more than a shop, but also everything that a shop includes. What led to you creating Lizzy's Fresh Coffee here in Ketchum?
It was a little bit of a long journey, to tell you the truth, but when I look back at it, I just think it was absolutely meant to be every step of the way. So, of course, growing up with my family in the business, so to speak, was great. Then when I met my husband, who's still my husband now, in our 20s, he had actually moved here from California, where he was working as a coffee roaster.
Oh.
And he was working part-time here doing that. I met him and I was like, this is pretty awesome. He's gonna
fit right in.
I'm liking this. So he did that for a couple of years and then moved on to his, important corporate job. But we kept on doing that at home as a hobby, which was awesome. We'd just use a little popcorn popper and make really sad home roasted coffee. And we'd order coffee from micro roasters across the country. And every time we wanted to embarrass ourselves again, we'd roast some of our own. So it was just something that we enjoyed. I had worked a long career here locally at a company called Smith Optics, which many people know, in operations. So I managed warehousing, purchasing, that kind of thing. Had a great opportunity then to take a new position at a company called Icebreaker that was here locally. Took that role, and 4 months after I started, the company announced it was moving all of its operations to Portland, and I just was like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen now? Well, I looked at it as an opportunity. So I agreed to stay on for the next year and help transition the team to Portland. And in doing so, I came out the other end with a great severance package. So literally money in one hand, business skills in the other, and anything I wanted to do. And I, without a doubt, knew it was going to be coffee.
And a passion looming. It's like we talk about a lot on the show, finding your element. And there it is, your skills and your passion.
Yes.
And the money ready to go.
Exactly.
You talked a little bit about making the coffee with your husband and kind of developing some rituals around that. I'd like to talk a little bit about coffee rituals, starting with your own, and then maybe we'll get into other people's. But so do you have a morning ritual?
I have a morning ritual, absolutely. I make coffee once I get to my shop here in Ketchum. I always turn on my computer, get the espresso machine going. I always have a latte first thing in the morning. It's my coffee of choice, and make a beautiful coffee for myself, pouring the espresso, texturing the milk, putting it all together, never skipping the latte art, putting it on a saucer, taking it to my desk, and then starting my day.
So you can get to work without it. You don't have to have it to get out of the house. Because I know for some people they do. I have a friend, and from the outside, she's the last person you think would drink much coffee. But for her, she said it was a godsend. Even as a child, she had a hard time kind of waking up in the morning, like being awake, even though she was out of bed and downstairs, and her brothers and sisters all teased her. And she said once she discovered coffee, her life changed. And she will drink 3 very large espressos or a huge cup of coffee and sort of has to before she gets going.
Sure. Everybody's a little different. And in fact, if I can't get great coffee, I can skip it altogether. So I am willing to delay the satisfaction to when I can get
So
it.
I was right. You truly are a connoisseur. And how many cups of coffee do you drink a day?
I limit myself to 2 coffees a day. Also have to, as part of the production process, have to taste or cup our coffees daily. So I really do have to be careful that I don't drink too much and skip the sleeping part of my day.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you about something I was going to talk about later, but you just mentioned cupping, and I saw on your website something about triangulation.
Ooh, triangulation.
Cupping. What in the world is that?
If you think of Sesame Street, one of these things is not like the other. It's actually a skill that you learn as someone who's cupping coffees to differentiate between flavors in the cup. So triangulation literally puts 3 cups together. 2 of them are the same and 1 is different, and you have to identify the different one. Seems like super easy.
Well, no, it seems like a fun game, a coffee game.
It is a fun game until the coffees get very, very, very similar, and then you keep going back, slurping again and slurping some more, and overdoing it. But you really do have. It is a great skill, and that's what we're.
And so, is it something that your tastes develop more? Do you think sensitively as you've gone on, or is it sort of you keep drinking more and more coffee, and then you may become more accustomed to it?
No,
what have you found?
Cupping is definitely a skill, and it has to be learned. The very first time I cupped, I sat at the table, with my coffee importer, and all I could really tell is that things were different. I couldn't tell why or what was different. So it's a skill that over the years, through courses and practice and daily cupping, I've gotten better and better at.
I love that it's a verb. You mentioned that your favorite drink of the morning would be a latte. Is that your favorite brew method?
Espresso brewing is one of my favorite brew methods, but being in the business that I'm in, it's like if you were in the clothing business, let's say, and you had a closet full of gorgeous cardigans or, cashmere sweaters, I don't know, every day you would wear a different one. So I love to switch it up. I do pour over, drip, French press, espresso, whatever I feel like or whatever I feel like tasting.
And what is it that you would say, maybe this might be an unfair question, but that sort of you love about coffee?
What do I love about coffee in terms of the taste of it?
It could be anything. Like, why coffee? Because it could have been pastries, it could have been tea, it could have been soccer tort.
Definitely. What I love about coffee, honestly, is the pure joy that is surrounding it at all times for me. I feel good when I drink it. I love it. My customers are incredible and happy and joyful, and everything about it is just a big smiley face for me.
Well, we'll be back in just a moment to talk more with Liz about coffee and the history of coffee and everybody's relationship with coffee. So stay with us on KDPI 89.3 FM. This is Ellie Newman on Its Relationship. We're back with Liz Roquet talking about coffee, and we were talking a little bit about the song that we just played over the break, and Liz was cringing, literally, and so I asked her to share with us why once we came back on the air. So Liz, what made you cringe about greasy coffee beans?
That greasy coffee beans. It is funny, and it's one of the questions I get so often in my shop is, why are some coffees greasy and oily and others are not? And there are actually two reasons that coffees look like that. One is that the coffee has been roasted very, very dark because the oils emerge to the surface as the coffee roasts longer and longer and longer. The second reason that oils are on the surface is the coffee is very, very old, a combination of usually being dark and very old. The oils in the coffee go rancid, don't taste good. So when I see greasy coffee, I'm like, oh, don't know.
And can you tell the difference, or does it matter?
Absolutely. From a roast degree, there's nothing wrong with a darkly roasted coffee if that's what you enjoy. It's going to be more smoky and less sweet. An old coffee is really going to kind of reach into that zone where it doesn't have a lot of flavor other than that sort of rancid, sharp,
So let me ask you, we're talking a little bit about roasting, the difference between the beans, the Arab, and I may not say these correctly, probably won't, Arabica versus the Robusta.
The Arabica versus the Robusta, or Robusta, depending on how fancy you want to be. Arabica coffees are grown, it's about 70% of the world's production, and they're grown typically at higher elevations. They're more flavorful, more interesting. And then the Robusta coffees are grown at lower elevations, grow more quickly, less flavorful, but actually have a higher caffeine content. In the Arabica species, that's what contains the specialty grade, which is that top 10% of the production of Arabica coffee, and the most interesting and flavorful.
And is there one that you use more than the others?
Yes, we use only specialty grade Arabica coffees.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the history of coffee. Starting with the dancing goats. That actually happened or not, but I was reading about that. But it has a surprisingly deep and rich history. I remember at one point reading the book Salt, and I was surprised to find there was so much in the history of salt, and there's just as much about coffee. Coffee's, I'm just going to give a little bit of background. Coffee's been around for over 500 years, and sometimes in a controversial history. It's one of the most traded agricultural commodities in the world, usually around number 2 or 3, and it's throughout history been banned for various religious or political reasons, especially in its early history, not so much lately, but there are still some religious groups that don't drink it, and some questions about whether or not it's kosher, and once that was established, there's more coffee getting drunk there. And there was also an early history of some exploitation and displacement in the countries that were growing it. Today we have over 100 million people in developing countries dependent on coffee as their primary source of income. In the 1830s, Brazil switched from gold to coffee, and now we have 70 countries worldwide pretty much that are producing it. So it's a big industry, and a lot of people depend on it for their existence. you have a great story and a coffee named for it, the Burundi Calico Limited Edition coffee, and I wondered if you might share with us the story behind that.
Sure, I'd love to. Well, first of all, coffee is the second most highly traded commodity, only behind oil. So it has a massive global impact, which is very interesting. And our coffee, just to give a little bit of background on what the limited edition coffees are, we have very interesting coffees that we buy for in small quantities and sell for a short amount of time until they're gone. They're really dynamic coffees where we know the whole supply chain all the way to the farmer. So in this case with the Calico coffee, it was very an interesting experience for me. Typically when I choose a new coffee, I call my importer and I say, hey, we're looking for our next limited edition coffee. And I look at the options and I say, I'd like you to send me this, this, and this. So in this case, they sent me an example or a sample of a Guatemalan, a Honduran, and this Burundi.
I'm going to interrupt for a second. So now, can you taste the difference between those three
Absolutely.
Places now, just off the bat? Like, this is from this area of the world, this is this country.
There are generalizations of regions for sure that and processing methods that will definitely shine a magnifying glass on where the coffee came from.
That's impressive.
You could do it too. So anyway, with this coffee, I asked for these 3 samples, and I got the backstories on 2 of the coffees, but the Burundi was sort of like thrown in at the end of our discussion, and so I got it and didn't know much about what was going on there. I tasted it in the cupping process that we always do. And when you cup coffees, there are flavors that are defined on the flavor wheel. You know, what does it have going on? You know, whether it's a certain body, acidity, fragrance, aroma, so on and so forth. I also have what I like to call my feel wheel. It's kind of my Liz thing that I do, where I define to myself, what's the impression of that coffee? Like, is it really happy? Is it really, interesting, or is it really, whatever the case may be, how does it make me feel, not how it makes me taste? In the case of that Burundi coffee, I wrote down comfort and love. It had this really great sweet brown sugar spices taste, just lovely in every way, and I just said, it's comfort and love. So I chose that coffee, contacted my importer and said, this is what I want, and can you send me the details on it? And when I got the details, that's when I absolutely fell in love with the grower and the region. The coffee is actually produced in Burundi, and the owner of the farm her name's Angeli Siza, and she was actually just recently featured on NPR's For Women to Watch in Coffee in Africa. I think that's what the title of it was. But she actually owns her own land, which is not common. She also has financial control. She employs 100 women on her land and actually helps improve their lives and the lives of their kids, which is incredible. I mean, it just makes you go like, this is not an easy path for this lady, and this is what she's choosing. The Women's Coffee Alliance, or the International Women's Coffee Alliance, just recently partnered to assist her in becoming more empowered and better at what she's doing.
And so will she grow the beans and also process them in
Correct.
any way?
She actually owns 7 washing stations across the region, which is where farmers will bring their products to be processed, basically. So she has a very big impact on what's going on currently in Burundi. And as a woman, her goal is to really help the women. I think her quote in the NPR article was, if you want to help the country, help the women, something to that effect, which is very true. And another fact about that's interesting is just in rural coffee growing across the globe or across Africa, 70% of the work is actually done by women.
So they're the ones who actually really understand the process.
Right.
and own the process.
Right. So what was really great about that story is I brought in the coffee, began selling it, sharing the story with my customers, which is always, it's something that's more recent in coffee, is that we have this transparency throughout the supply chain. And when I say recent, I say the past 20 years. I mean, really, coffee's been around for 500. So it's a very long time. Maybe at the very beginning when you knew your farmer in Ethiopia, then that was a direct supply relationship. But pretty much then traders got involved, and then there was a lot of, well, it just came from Africa, or it just came from South America. And there wasn't a real need or desire to know, well, who grew that? So now so many coffee companies are working to create that transparency.
And do you find that the customers are that they care about that's a factor in their choice in buying?
Most definitely customers are interested in knowing about it. And like anything, some customers are more interested than others. Others are, some are just like, I just love it, it's good, and I'm so happy it has a neat story, whatever.
It's high on my on Lizzy's flavor wheel and the emotional wheel.
Exactly. So I had the lucky experience of actually getting to meet Anjali when I was just recently at the specialty coffee show in Boston. I was at the triangulation cupping course, and my instructor there said, are you coming to the breakfast? No, I'm not coming to the breakfast. I don't have time this year, but I just recently purchased a coffee that's one of the projects from the Women's Coffee Alliance. And she said, from where? From Burundi. And she said, oh, from Anjali. And she literally knew her by name, which I don't know why it surprised me. She said, she's here. So I, got all excited, and I'm like, oh my gosh, how can I meet her? Where is she? She said, let me work on it. So the next day she called me and left a message, and she said, I spoke to Anjali. She's at the Burundi booth. She's waiting for you. I ran over there like a person running to their job where you're totally late for work, and came around the corner and immediately spotted her. She's this big, beautiful African woman. She was actually dressed in Western clothing, but big white smile, big eyes. I walked straight up to her and said, hi, I'm Liz from Lizzy's Fresh Coffee, and she just gave me the biggest hug. That was her greeting, just an immediate smile and hug. And I can't tell you, when certain people just give off this energy that you're just mesmerized by. I just wanted to talk to her for as long as I could. So she began telling me her story and the work that she's doing, and asking, like a good businesswoman should, is the coffee good? Are you enjoying it? We're still working to improve it. Thank you so much for being our customer, which was really remarkable. She wasn't just a story or in any way a victim. She was very much like, this is what I do, and I'm so proud of it, and I'm so proud to share it with you. And the icing on the cake, I think for both of us, and for her especially, was when I told her I was actually the roaster, and she just thought it was amazing. Oh my gosh, a woman roasting the coffee, which isn't the most typical thing in coffee roasting. It's a little bit more of a guy sport at this point.
Right.
So that was great. And we continued to talk for quite a while and interjected hugs about every minute. And I know it's just the beginning of our relationship. I don't know what it's going to lead to, but I'm really excited to see how we develop our friendship in the years to come.
And it's so exciting to make that connection between a very small town in Ketchum, Idaho, to a town in Africa. And
that's very much the case. And, larger coffee companies, or depending on how you want to do your business and how much time, I could be traveling to origin every month, but I work really tightly with my coffee importer, and that's their job. So, going to origin for me has been something I've done once so far. It's not an everyday occurrence. So it really is special when I get to connect.
Let's talk a little bit about the environmental issues. You mentioned that there's more interest now in finding out not just the country of origin, but exactly where did the coffee come from. And I'm guessing also maybe how was the coffee produced. I know there is a growth in the fair trade organization in coffee, and some concerns about water usage and pesticides and sustainability with so much of the land being used for growing coffee. Is that something that you get involved with when you're choosing where to buy your coffee?
I only choose shade-grown coffees, and the reality is that coffee is a shrub, and it's meant to be on the ground with the trees as a canopy. When that's happening, the whole ecosystem works at its best. The birds can do what they do. The fruit trees can do what they do. The water is managed. There's not an erosion problem, so on and so forth. So it is a very important issue for me to choose those coffees.
And the alternative to that would be a sun cultivation, which I think is fairly new within the 500 years of coffee growing. And is that less sustainable and less ideal for the environment?
Yes, most definitely. I mean, the reason to do that is to speed up the process from seed to harvest when you expose the coffee to the full sun. The unfortunate part of that is, of course, you've removed the trees, but also, or maybe there's a section that didn't have trees, let's be fair, but also it does require a higher amount of water, and it does require more pesticides. So faster production, but what are we giving up for that?
And do you see a shift? I know it's a similar situation developed within the cattle industry, where some farmers started to kind of grow their cows faster, and the ones who were interested in more sustainability, more natural, more organic, they had a big pressure on them, because here were these other farmers that could turn a cow around in 8 months rather than 13 or 14.
Yes, most definitely. People are very, very interested in the coffees with the highest flavor potential. So the coffees that are shade grown, grow more slowly, produce a more flavorful cup, and without a doubt, the whole coffee industry is pushing towards higher and higher quality.
Oh, that's a good direction to be going for everyone, it sounds like. Well, we'll be back in just a moment. We'll talk about maybe the health benefits and maybe hazards with drinking coffee. And this is Ellie Newman on It's Relationship. I'm here with Liz Roquet from Lizzy's Fresh Coffee in Ketchum. Please stay tuned, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. This is Ellie Newman on It's Relationship. I'm here with Liz Roquet from Lizzy's Fresh Coffee here in Ketchum. And we are going to talk a little bit about the health benefits and maybe health hazards, if any exist, in coffee drinking. Probably more of the hazards with excessive coffee drinking, but I will ask the expert. So, Liz, are there health benefits to drinking coffee?
Sure. Let me start by saying I am not a doctor, and nor do I play one on television. So what I'm about to say is really secondhand information. I mean, there are so many studies going on about coffee, and as we all know, coffee has gone through the don't even do it to the wow, it's amazing, and everything in between. So I think the lesson here and where we sit currently with coffee is that everything in moderation is a pretty good thing. I mean, when you think about coffee, it is just one ingredient, coffee from the earth, and it does contain amazing healthful antioxidants. It also contains caffeine, which is a drug and does affect everybody differently. Caffeine, all those things can affect anybody in different ways. Some of the studies that we know about caffeine is that it increases mental performance, alertness, and concentration. We didn't need a study for that. Everybody knew that, right? Yesterday or this morning at work.
After you had a cup.
Exactly. And it's also been shown to reduce the risk of Parkinson's, diabetes, colon cancer, and cardiovascular disease. So it is pretty incredible what coffee's potential is, and there's just still so much to learn about it. So what I do in my life is everything in moderation.
And I think it's exactly what you said. It affects people differently. Another thing I like to talk about on the show is we're all in this world very differently. We experience it differently. We are all different things. We relate to things differently, and they affect us differently. For some people, you'll have a cup of coffee to get rid of a headache. For someone else, it might give you a headache. And it seems, too, depending on your system, the level of acidity in the coffee seems to have a huge impact on whether it will be a benefit or a detriment.
For sure. I mean, one of the most interesting things about coffee is that it contains over 50 organic acids. That's incredible. It's very dynamic, and acids are kind of misunderstood. It is in coffee what makes it interesting, what makes it snappy. So it gives it that lemony taste, that orangey taste. You think acids, and you actually go, oh my gosh, that reminds me of fruit. You're speaking of fruit right now. But it
well, and it's a berry, right, originally?
Yes, exactly. So that acidity is very much there, not in the way that people often identify with it, but it can have a different impact on one person's stomach over another.
And are there ways to control the level of the acidic taste in the coffee?
Well, there's the acidic taste, those bright fruity flavors that you get certainly come more from certain origins than others. So, for example, Central and South American coffees are more typically known to have more intense acidic attributes, whereas coffees from Africa or Sumatra specifically, not so much. So you'll see some things on the market now, low acid coffees. The jury is out on
low carb.
What exactly is going on there. So
Marketing's going on.
Leave it up to what you know in your belly. If you drink it and it's not working for you, move on to something else.
We're going to switch over to talking about the artisan in you and in your relationship to coffee. But before we do, I've got to ask about the Kopi Luwak and the coffee that's $160 a pound.
Oh, that's some good stuff right there. I'm saying that in a joking way. This coffee is actually coffee berries that had at one time been eaten and then excreted by the Asian palm civet. This is this little sort of kitty cat.
And who tried it? I mean, that's what I'm wondering.
It was something that these animals ate naturally in the wild.
Right.
And then somebody said, whoa, what's that on the ground? I think that's coffee. I think I'll turn that into a cup. And
nice.
What's actually happening is the fermentation, the processing is actually happening within this animal's stomach. And just like we would take the coffee and actually ferment it out on a patio and so forth. This is happening in this animal's stomach. It comes out. The unfortunate thing about this coffee is that these animals are kept in crates and basically fed and
like the chicken farms.
Exactly.
Have you tried it?
I have not tried it, and I can say I'd say it's not my thing.
Maybe on a dare.
Exactly.
All right. I want to talk a little bit about artisanship. I want to read the definition of an artisan. One definition. An artisan is a person skilled in an applied art, a craftsperson, one who produces high quality of a distinctive product in small quantities, usually by hand or usually using traditional methods. You are definitely an artisan. And I wonder if you might tell us a little bit about how you developed your craft and how it's still developing and what were the biggest challenges and sort of what the process looked like.
Oh, definitely. So when I decided, back when I said, I'm going to do coffee, the very, very first thing I realized is that is the thing I knew the least about. I had these business skills. I could do purchasing. I could do marketing. I could do the website. I could do these things.
Which were going to come in very handy.
Which are going to work out. But oh my gosh, coffee, I really don't know how to do this. And I am not a learn as I go kind of person. I know there are these people out there who've been there before me, and I went directly to them to begin learning. So I started my training with Dietrich Manufacturing, which is the manufacturer of my coffee roaster, an intense multi-day course, and then moved on to training with my coffee importer and developing our different roasts and learning there. And then twice a year, I continue to take courses working towards my roaster's level 1 certification.
So how long did you spend within the first part of that process? Was that months? Was it a year?
No. I
Weeks?
spent days within that first part of that process and then working on my own. So going to the training and then working on my own. Definitely looking back, I know there were mistakes and things that I didn't do as well as I do now, but I think that's what's so cool about being an artisan is learning as you go and becoming better and better and honing your craft every single day. Every single day I get better. And there are things that I can take in and learn now that I couldn't take in and learn then. I'm not doing it how I did it then. And of course the basics remain, but the knowledge and the experience that's gained makes me better and better every day.
Which is true in any art or science, right? As you're going, you're developing more knowledge and talent and understanding of what you're working with, which allows you to develop and grow, which is fantastic.
And it's funny because I'll sign up, for courses, and I just, like I said, came back from Boston where I took a whole weekend worth of courses towards my certification. And sometimes you sign up for something and you're like, I know this. I get in the class and my mind is blown. I didn't know that, or I learned something new, or it was the evolution of some information that I knew. And it just over and over again reminds me to never stop learning.
So you have a beautiful roasting machine. It's a fabulous color blue. You look at it and just think that's cool when you see
sexy.
it. It's sexy. Are you happy with it? Would you get that machine again? And could you tell us just a little bit about why it's important to have a great roasting machine to make great coffee?
Oh, definitely. I mean, Dietrich Manufacturing is one of the top roasting companies, most machine manufacturers in the world, and there's a reason that the top roasters all over use these type of machines. It's called a drum roaster. So the coffee goes in the top and it spins in a drum and is heated by infrared burners. We as a roaster affect the time, the temperature, and the airflow to really keep track of what that coffee is doing every step of the way.
And do you have to play with it as you go, or for certain coffees do you have a pattern set up that is pretty reliable?
Yeah, so we roast on what's called a profile, and you can either roast manually or you can have an automation system, and we actually have an automation system. And what that has done for me is it basically just watched me as I was doing my work, as I'm trying roast, cupping them, cupping, and I'm like, love it, that is tasting perfect. I can then save that profile, and what the equipment does for me is it repeats what I've done, right or wrong. It repeats what I've done. So then my job as a roaster is to always make sure that that's still current. So you can never just put in the coffee and walk away. coffees change from harvest to harvest, of course. Day to day, they'll evolve and change. Moisture content will change. And so you always have to be attentive. And like I said earlier in the show, we're cupping our coffees every day, making sure, if this is the coffee, our signature blend, this is how it tastes, and this is how it still tastes today. And how it's going to taste tomorrow.
You're roasting and shipping every day, which is unique.
Most definitely. I mean, you'll see this more and more with top quality roasters in the specialty market and what we're known as a third wave of coffee. Really understanding.
That's pretty good, third wave after 500 years.
I know. Slow moving, isn't it?
It
It's
is.
pretty ridiculous.
They're really big waves.
I mean, it's really true that not a lot of anything happened for a really, really long time. And then all of a sudden things have just taken flight.
I want to talk about, for the rest of our time, we don't have too much left, your relationship with your customers. And because that, to me, is such a direct offshoot with your passion about coffee, because you are passionate about making a great coffee. But more than that, I think you are passionate about having your customers experience a really great cup of coffee wherever that may be. And that takes a lot of energy and effort.
Most definitely. And what's so crazy about coffee is everyone along the supply chain, the farmer has taken care, the exporter, the importer has taken care to take care of the coffee. As the roaster, we've taken care to roast it to highlight its best attributes. And now I hand it over to you, where you completely have the potential to mess it up at the point of brewing. So the barista, the home brewer, has so much work to get done. And it's one of the things that people don't understand about coffee. You can't just take it, open it, pour some water on it, and woo, there you go. You really have to know and understand what to do. So what I really is so important to me is, when I started the company, I didn't want to be one of those companies that's like, we're awesome, you're stupid. I wanted to be like, we're awesome and we want you to be awesome. We want you to succeed. So it's all about educating our customers, all about drawing them in. And no question is, I can't tell you how many times people ask, well, how should I be grinding my coffee? How hot should the water be? What size should I, on and on and on and on. And there's no dumb question, because our goal is to make people love what they're drinking at home.
And I think there's a lot of misinformation out there. Should we put it in the freezer? Shouldn't we put it in the freezer? Should it be in the sunlight? How long should we keep it?
Sure.
All that.
Talk about storing coffee, about using high quality water, about what kind of grind is appropriate for what kind of brew, all kinds of things. You could really shank your coffee along the way.
So you have classes, you have tours, you have tastings. Through all that, have you learned a lot about the coffee drinker and sort of what their relationship with coffee is? Is it fleeting? Is it committed? Do they tend to like one coffee? What do they care about?
Oh my gosh, it's so funny. And that's one of the things I love. And I apologize, I'm not going to name anybody by names right now. But it is interesting, our customers' relationship with their coffee. Some are, I love this, and this is what I drink, and this is only what I drink, and that is what I want, goodbye. And others are, I'm going to try this, I'm going to try that, I'm going to try something new, and are very inquisitive and are willing to explore new ideas, new brewing methods, different coffees, for example. Some customers never drink the same coffee 2 weeks in a row. They'll always change. But the thing that I do get a lot is that in our store, that desire that people have to make it better. They're shopping with us because they already want to make it better. They're there because they've tried maybe something not so great, and they're like, I want to make it better. So they're ready to learn, and they're excited to learn something.
Are they scared? Do you feel that most people come in and are a bit intimidated? Even working an espresso machine can be challenging.
Oh my gosh.
I still don't really understand the French press.
Oh no, exactly. It is intimidating, and we don't make it intimidating for people. When people have a question, I'm like, that's a great question. Why would I make you feel stupid at this point? And it takes a lot of effort, and especially with espresso brewing, that's not something you learn in just a few minutes. That takes hours.
And are you a coffee sissy if you just want a brewed cup? Is
No,
that
no.
or
I always
is
say to
that
people,
still have some respect?
Most definitely. Everything has respect. And what's interesting, espresso has had so much attention played on it with the arrival of Starbucks in 1971, and that must be what coffee is. But what's really happening is this resurgence of brew methods like the French press, the pour over, the siphon, the Chemex. And you drink what you like. There's no right or wrong way to do it. I'll have customers come in for tasting day and they're like, ugh, is it not cool to put half and half in it? I'm like, it is as cool as you want it to be. You just do what makes you smile. At the end of the day, I just want people to enjoy their coffee.
And have you had people who have started, I'm only going to drink a cup of coffee out of the brew machine, and then they end up decorating their latte with a bunny?
I have. It's been great. Whenever we sell an espresso machine, I actually insist on giving people courses here locally. So we get their machines in, set them all up, and then invite them in for a course. And it's so fun now to follow my customers a couple years after the fact, and they're like, look what I made. They send me little emails about how proud they are, and oh my gosh, I finally poured a Rosetta and I can't believe it.
So you're creating connoisseurs. Not only are you a connoisseur, but through your artisanship, you're creating connoisseurs.
Definitely, and it makes those coffee drinkers, when they go out to a cafe, it raises their expectation of what they should be getting. And the same goes for the cafes that we work with. We never just sell them equipment and send them on their way. It's all about training the staff and drawing them in to finish the work that's been done so far.
People are going to start sending back their coffees just like people do wine. This is really unacceptable.
Exactly.
Well, we'll be back in just a moment. This is Ellie Newman on It's Relationship. I'm here with Liz Roquet, and stay with us. This is Ellie Newman on It's Relationship, and I am here with Liz Roquet, and we are just finishing up our talk about coffee. And I want to talk a little bit, Liz, about the social aspect of coffee. We've mentioned it, but I want to delve in a little deeper. You mentioned Starbucks stores. I want to give a little history. Coffee houses started in Constantinople in the Ottoman Empire, and that's a long time ago, and then trickled through Venice and Europe, and then over to America. And now Starbucks has 16,600 stores in 4 countries, and Seoul has 10,000 cafes and coffee houses. There's also, I got to mention, a Bach coffee cantata that I didn't play today, but we all have to go listen to that. We're going to be so hyped up about coffee. So there's more to than just drinking the drink. Coffee houses have been places in the early days of when they started in Paris where the Enlightenment was sort of developed. And in America, it's said that Paul Revere planned the revolution in some type of coffee house. I think they might have been drinking some beer as well, but they had coffee. And what do you think it is about coffee that has allowed that to be the drink that sort of started this revolution?
That's a really interesting question, and I really think it's not really about the coffee. It's about the place that the coffee created. And this is these are words that came from Starbucks founder about creating that third place. It's a place to go to get together to talk. And when we talked earlier in the show about my upbringing in the pastry shop, that's exactly what was happening. So making a place to go over whatever. It could have been tea. It could have been sushi for all we know. But something about it's a short commitment. It's not that expensive. And the coffee houses really facilitated that opportunity to talk and share and plan. And even today, it's funny when somebody, like a friend, says, let's go for coffee, or a colleague says, let's go for coffee. It can mean anything. It can mean a date, a job interview, an idea exchange, just venting, anything. It serves so many purposes and really gives so many different people whatever outlet they want.
I'm thinking about a couple of things you mentioned during the show about coffee that maybe also led to it, in that you talked about care and that coffee is produced with care. And even when you're at the coffee shop, it's personal. They are producing it with care. You're looking at the large menu. You're ordering what is right for you then and there. And then they are producing it with care and handing it over.
Well, most definitely. And that's, when you mention that is really where we are in the evolution of coffee. They're really what has been come to be agreed through 3 waves of coffee. The beginning, where we were, the beginning, and then let's talk about the middle of the century, when a lot of people were drinking stuff out of a can. Awesome. And then in 1971, when Starbucks began, it really lifted the bar for people, like, wow, something can be better than that. And without what Starbucks did for the coffee industry, roasters like Lizzy's could not be where we are now. Now, this third wave of coffee is about lifting it beyond that. So like you said, going to the coffee house and having it produced with this extreme care and really a higher level of engagement and detail than we'd ever had before. But it's just the natural evolution of how things go. The better it is, the more people want, the more questions they ask, and it just...
And the more individualized it's become. Because, there are people who want to go for the coffee date, but maybe can't drink coffee. Maybe they get a little too tense or it hurts their stomach. Well, you can have a decaf or a half calf or, there's 1,000 different ways you can have your coffee these days.
For sure.
And so it also is serving that need for a meeting place where it really is, it's communal, but it also is individualized. It's almost, the cheers of today.
Definitely.
Instead of which is probably better, instead of going to the bar and having the drinks every day, you come and have some type of warm drink. And maybe the warmth of it as well.
Definitely.
Is soothing. I want to talk a little bit about also an offshoot of this third wave of growth of coffee is the competitions. They go from regional to national to international, and there are, worldwide. And I heard a story about you being invited to be a judge at one of the competitions, and I want to hear a little bit about your experience there, and then also what came from that experience where you raised some money for a very remote community, if you wouldn't mind telling us about that.
I'd love to tell you about that. Well, the competitions are really interesting, and they are a lot of barista competitions that are going around internationally now. But this particular competition was... I landed at it accidentally. It was when I opened my store. My young son in third grade was looking at the map I had put up on the wall, and he said, "Mom," I was marking where the different origins were, the coffees that we purchased. What's life like for kids who live there? And I kind of laughed like, well, Cooper.
Which is an awesome question for your third grader to ask. You're doing a good job as a mom.
I said, they don't have 16 sweatshirts and electronic devices. School may not be part of their day. Work likely is part of their day. They might have to go days waiting to get paid before their family can eat. So it's not like your life. It's not necessarily easy. And he just looked at me and just in such a simple way said, "I want to do something nice for a kid who lives, quote, there."
There. That's awesome.
So I called my coffee importer and I said, "I apologize. I'm putting on my little mommy hat here, but my son wants to do something nice." And I'm thinking like buy a book, send a coloring book, exchange some pictures or something. And it was like he'd been waiting for my phone call all day.
Wow.
I said, how does he feel about soccer? And I said, "Oh my God, he's obsessed." He said, "Would he be willing to help these kids in Monserrate, Colombia, get soccer jerseys?" I asked him. He said yes. He got his teacher involved. We then involved the entire third grade class at Hemingway at the time, and they designed labels, sold their coffee, and raised enough money to buy these kids soccer jerseys, balls. They wrote them cards and everything. So I called my importer and I said, "Okay, the kids did it. They've got all the stuff. How do you want me to get it there?" And he's like, You need to come with us."
And you need to come with the jerseys.
Exactly. And what was part of the job of coming along was being a judge in this coffee competition, this cupping competition, where 59 of the local coffees, literally farmer next door to farmer next door to farmer, were submitted to win the Best of this Region award. And the top coffees would get a prize of additional cost per pound plus a bonus prize. So I had that great experience because of my son going there and being a judge and learning so much and just getting thrown into this experience that I wouldn't have had otherwise.
Oh, that's fantastic. And that is relationship. That's what this show is all about, is the relationship with coffee, and that's where it has led you in a number of wonderful places and benefited us all. So thank you so much, Liz, for joining us.
Thank you, Ellie. It was great fun.